And we should be all set. Take it away, Shaun.
Alrighty. Well, hey, everybody. My name is Shaun. I went to Iowa State. Did many things that you guys are probably up to now I graduated back in 2016. So I wanted to kind of give a quick talk about how I think about internships, career stuff, and getting over to Silicon Valley, where I've been the past couple of years now. So without further ado, let me try to share my screen here. All right. Let's see here. All right. All right. You guys are able to see something that should look like some slides and things. Is that about right?
Yep, we can see it.
Great. All righty. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, I'll share a bit about my journey. I'll share some resume strategies, some interview strategies, some internship strategies. We can chat about finding a startup, and then we'll probably end, I would imagine, with about 30 or so minutes. I think it'll take about 30 minutes or so. So we should have a solid 20 minutes of kind of questions, or we can just chat a bit more casually. So without further ado, all right, who am I? Well, I grew up in Pella. If you guys are from central Iowa, you might know Pella. Otherwise, don't worry about it. Small town, southeast of Des Moines. I started at Iowa State from like 2011 and 2016. I ended up getting my degree in software engineering. I had 6 kind of full-time, quote-unquote, internships. We'll talk a bit more about those. Now I've been, I've been working at 2 different Silicon Valley startups for the past 4 years. And my last internship was at Twilio, based in San Francisco as well. So that's about super high level myself. I just want to take you guys through the journey a little bit I was on while at Iowa State. So to kind of start off, it's freshman year, August 2011, hanging out in Helzer. It's pretty normal stuff. When I got here, actually started off as a mechanical engineer. Never really coded anything besides just like basic HTML, like really basic, and then like the calculator, right, to just make some games or whatever. As a mechanical engineer, though, I really started to fall in love with MATLAB, which ironically, since I switched over to software engineering, I never used again. But we'll get into that a bit. But as I took the very first class, my first semester as a mechanical engineer, I realized I actually really loved this coding stuff, and everybody else really didn't love it. And so I was like, okay, I'm a little bit different. Maybe I'll see where this coding stuff kind of goes. And I think my first year, I joined just a ton of engineering clubs, like across the board. Like pretty much every engineering club that was remotely relevant to me, I probably joined. So that was kind of cool. I think the 2 notable things that coming out of that was I really tried to get involved in the career fair. And we'll talk about a bit more about kind of student clubs and whatnot here pretty soon. But I joined as their, I think it was like the advertising chair. The spring semester, and then I always loved like engineering outreach a lot, and so this first Lego League thing is something that Iowa State puts on, and I wanted to go ahead and get involved with that too. So I applied for their planning committee and got that one as well. So that's kind of like the freshman year, Shaun. Looking ahead, just to kind of give you a preview of what's to come, I guess. My internship journey started off. My very first internship actually I got was in at the MathWorks that makes MATLAB software. I had done some undergraduate research, I guess, after my freshman year. So I wasn't really planning on it. I actually got my Union Pacific internship like at the fall career fair my sophomore year. And then I just started applying for like this MathWorks thing because I loved MATLAB so freaking much. And I actually got this offer to go join them in the spring. I took off my spring semester to go work there. And I'm happy to kind of answer some questions now or at the end about like pros and cons of taking off a semester of school to go do an internship. But anyways, after I did the MathWorks and the Union Pacific as a systems engineering intern, I got back to school, and at that point I changed my major to go be full-on software engineering. So I started as a semester and a half in, actually, already with mechanical, But when I came back to start my third year, I said, hey, I just want to do software at that point. I don't want to do mechanical anymore. So, but I got in my next internship with Boeing. It turns out everybody at Boeing goes to Amazon. This is back in like 2014. I'm sure it's still very true today, given Amazon's success. And even my manager at Boeing during my internship left to go work at Amazon. So like, okay, I want to go work at Amazon next. So I talked to them. I just kind of like applied online, I think, for Amazon. And then at the career fair, I was also talking to Microsoft. And so I actually ended up getting kind of both internships. And as opposed to choosing one or the other, I said, I bet I can do the Amazon one in the spring and then the Microsoft one in the summer. And that ended up being an amazing experience. And also the internships pay really, really well. So I actually just made like a crap ton of money in 2015, which is great. Like pretty much paid for like the rest of my school after that point from that internship money. And then my last internship was in Twilio as kind of like my first startup sort of experience. And this is when actually Twilio was going public. So I was there kind of for that summer, which was a really exciting time to kind of see one, both an amazing startup and actually like the good things that can happen at a startup. So that was kind of cool for the internships. And these were all like, besides like the first two, like pure on like software developer, I guess, internships, just to be clear there. So that's kind of what I'll be speaking to, how I achieved that before graduating. And just to kind of maybe talk about student clubs for a bit. I would say every single role builds. I guess actually going back to the internships here, I didn't jump into a Microsoft internship as my first internship. It literally took like 3 or 4 internships before that and lots of other kind of work experiences before I was able to land that Microsoft internship. And actually, I vividly remember the first time I interviewed with Microsoft was when I interviewed with Boeing, like that same year, like my junior year. And I failed hard in that interview. Like it was terrible. And I think we literally just like looked at the person interviewing me like, hey, not yet. And it's like, yeah, you know, I think we just looked at each other and was like, okay, this is not the year. But you know what, then the next year we actually got it, right? And so I say this to kind of show that things take time and things build and build and build on top of each other. And just like stocks or investing or all this compound interest, the compound interest is very much in your career and your internships as well. And so I want to expect people to go from like having their first internship be like at Microsoft or Twilio. Usually it takes a lot of experience and learning things the hard way and different experiences just before you can get that kind of internship in the door. So it starts off with non-Silicon Valley internships probably for most people, or other experiences at least. All right, so anyways, we're in a student club. That's what you guys are here right now, which is awesome. I'm glad you guys are able to participate. My general rule of thumb is for you to be a member for a year, check it out, see if you can do anything with it, if it's cool. Next year, there's probably like a leadership team, right? For every student club has some kind of leadership team of sorts, like committee, whatever. There's usually some like really cool roles like president or something else. And there's a bunch of like not quite as sexy things like the accountant or the advertising chair or the outreach chair. And there's some things I was like, it's not probably like the most amazing thing ever. But what that really lets you do is say, hey, I've actually already been on this leadership team for a whole year. And now the next year, you get to do that really awesome thing. So like your junior, senior year, now you can go be the president of this club. You can go do this awesome thing. You can go be the vice president of something, what have you. And if you do that early enough, we can even do it again your senior year. So that's pretty cool too. I would say this builds across clubs. And so if you are the VP of accounting for one club, and you want to go be the VP of accounting for your other bigger, cooler club, that builds too. And that way you can kind of like swing it like, I think I was the outreach chair for another club, and then I applied to the engineering student council, and I was able to be the outreach chair for the engineering student council for a year. And then after that, I said, hey, I want to be the president of the Engineering Student Council for Iowa State. And I actually got it. And so that was also pretty darn cool. But it's like, that took, 4 years in the making to make happen. So it kind of builds across each other that way. Any questions about journey so far? Anything immediately like, oh my gosh, I want to know more about this part?
I had one question about just preparing for these interviews, but if you're going to talk about that later on, then I can
Yes.
go into that. I'm sure that might be a section.
Yes, yeah, I will indeed. So let's
Sure.
save it then. That sounds great though. I'd love to hear your question. Anybody else have another question they had about just journey so far, what worked, what didn't work, or tips?
I guess I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How many clubs were you a part of, and how many would you recommend being a part of?
Yeah, great question. So I would say I went pretty hard, but I think it paid off. So by the time I left Iowa State, I think I was the chair of the overall engineering career fair, the president of the engineering student council. I had this first Lego thing was actually the largest outreach event, engineering outreach event in the state of Iowa, and I was the chair of that one. And so, I was able to do all those things mostly because I had all these other filler roles. So I probably was part of maybe an active member and maybe 6 or 7 clubs. And then I was kind of more of a casual member of maybe 3 or 4 more. I'll put it this way. Every single night I had free dinner. There was not one night, I guess with COVID it's a little bit different, but literally every single night of the week I had a free dinner as part of a student club. And I literally set it up. And I might have 2 or 3, hey, from 6 to 8, I have just clubs in the evening. But I got to do a bunch of cool stuff, meet a lot of amazing people, and get free food every single day. So I was in enough clubs to do that, I suppose. But maybe that's a good way to answer the question.
What kind of clubs do you suggest being in?
Yeah, I think this one is great. I know there's kind of the hackathon stuff going on as well, the overall hackathon things. I think that one's excellent. I know there was, at least when I was there, there's a security group one. That can be really good if that's kind of what you're into. I know there's the digital woman group as well, if that's kind of interest. And I think besides that though, there's also lots of cross-functional, I guess, engineering groups. So I just remember the Society of International Engineers was a club when I was there. The Career Fair is a club. Engineering Week is a club. Student Council is a club. And there's lots of those kinds of things that are ancillary to kind of computer science or software engineering, but still really helpful as well. So I try to kind of mix both the pure coding and software stuff with some of the other general well-rounded things as well. So does that help? Okay, cool. But if you think of any other questions, by all means, we'll have some time at the end, or just kind of share them as needed here. So, alrighty. I wanted to give you some opinions about resumes. These are opinions. There are no facts, but here's what worked for me. So, in terms of the layout, you need to be 1 page, no exceptions, period. Again, I was probably part of 10 or so different student clubs. I had my 6 different internships. I had all my coding experience, my educational experience. I had a bunch of entrepreneurship stuff I did as well, and I still put it on 1 page. You can fit it on 1 page, and you need to put it on 1 page. So if you're 2 pages right now, figure out a way to consolidate it, make it shorter, use columns. In terms of making things shorter, some people put an about me paragraph of hey, I'm a student studying this, I'm interested in that, and blah, blah, blah. Same thing with the objective. You do not need either of these sections and they take up space that you can better use for other stuff. If your resume is like truly empty and it's like I have nothing on my resume, maybe put it. But as your resume starts getting full, I would just take them off. On the objective side specifically, you're going to see like mixed advice. Frankly, I don't read it. Everybody's objective is the same, right? Like, I'm sure every single person might ask you what your objective is on your resume, and this like Google Meet right now, we're all going to say the same thing. We want an internship. We want to learn some experience. We want to study this area. It doesn't add anything, and it just takes up space. So I would take it off. I would encourage you to leave your education at the top of your resume until probably about 2 or 3 years post-graduation. So certainly while in school, it needs to be at the very top, what degree you're getting, what year you are graduating, and what your GPA is. The year you're graduating is key. For better or for worse, almost every single employer cares about when you graduate, because that's when they can actually hire you, and they make they get lots of value from you when they hire you for real post your internship. So they need to clearly know when you're graduating. Do not put any hobbies or interests unless they are relevant to the job. So if your hobby is coding things, cool, put it on your resume. If your hobby is dogs or doing some other random thing, soccer even, I probably wouldn't put it on there unless it's like, hey, I was the president of the Iowa soccer club for 2 years as a hobby kind of thing. That's just the extracurricular at that point. So do put extracurriculars, do put club involvement if you are not just a member. If you're just a member, I would probably not put it on there, right? So I wouldn't, if you're just going to attend a few meetings, because someone's going to ask you about it. I would expect that if it's on your resume, it's fair game for me to ask you a question about what you did at that club. If your answer is, well, I sat there 3 times a year and I ate pizza, it's not going to be very interesting. So make sure like you have a story about whatever's on your resume. Your full mailing address is irrelevant. You probably don't need an address whatsoever. If you feel like that's going too far, put a city state. I don't need to know where to mail things to you because I'm not going to mail things to you. And then tactically, always share it and save it as a PDF. So someone says apply online, apply with the PDF. If someone says email me your resume, email them a PDF. If you email them a Word doc, it's going to show up really, really wrong in Gmail. Like Gmail just does not support Word, and it will turn it into a Google Doc. When it turns Word docs into Google Docs, it looks really bad in general. So that's some layout advice. Any immediate questions or like, hey, immediate things I guess popping up in people said?
Yeah, what about community service? Should you include that in your resume, even though it's not necessarily relating to the kind of job would you want?
Yeah, I would say it can be considered like an extracurricular or like kind of in that section maybe, but I would make sure it's meaningful, right? So if like, again, if it's, hey, I did 300 hours of community service and actually led this committee to do this part of community service, absolutely put that on there. If it's like, hey, I did a volunteer day, I probably would not put that on there. And so I think it can be, but I would encourage you to be like, again, if someone asks you a question about it, and like, does that really help show them who you are and what you care about and like your skills, I guess, in that way. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, okay, cool. Any other questions about like maybe like what content to put on the resume? I have a few more slides, I guess, too.
Also work experience. I work a job, but it's not necessarily relating to anything software related. Like,
Yeah.
how can I twist it so
Yes.
it can be useful?
Yes, absolutely. Great question. So you should definitely put work experience on here, even if it's like not like computers related, right? I think that work experience does show like, hey, I actually have had jobs and have had experiences. I think there's a way to make everything sound pretty darn cool. I saw like someone had like they were a barista, but it's like, hey, I actually we'll get into this, but like I handled $4,000 in transactions every day. and I led 4 different trainings every quarter for other employees. And when you start to think about how can I quantify and talk about this job, you can actually make it sound pretty meaningful, as opposed to oh, as a barista and I serve coffee to people, right? That doesn't sound as fancy as hey, there's actually some kind of proficiency, or even I served 420 cups of coffee every day as kind of a metric, right? So I think it's definitely fair game there. I guess some other tips here. You do need your GPA in your resume, full stop. So you can't trick people by not adding it. I know people oh, if it's under 2.5, just go put it on there. I'm going to ask about it. And so I'd rather just you put it on there and then you talk about it, then you probably not put it on there. Mileage may vary. People might disagree. That's my personal take. Sometimes I see people listing courses. No one knows courses at Iowa State anymore. One, as soon as you graduate and you've been away for a few years, even myself, I still know some courses, sure. But one, it doesn't really help me understand what you know. It takes up a ton of space on your resume to list out your courses, and anybody that's not from Iowa State will have absolutely no clue what your course does. In fact, they take a course in data structures. Doesn't really mean you know data structures. I'd rather kind of just see you list it as a skill or something like that, as opposed to listing out a whole long list of courses that you've taken so far. I am of the belief that you really shouldn't have a paragraph anywhere or used very sparingly. I think actually in my latest resume, I did have a paragraph that kind of explained maybe what the company I did, the startup I was at, what they did, because not people know the startup. But in general, a paragraph and a resume do not go together, and I would use them very sparingly, if at all. And now the other hard part for us as software type people is coding proficiencies. So usually you kind of have a long list of hey, I know Java, Python, HTML, CSS, React, what have you. And then sometimes people try to put a beginner, advanced, expert kind of thing. That's really hard. It's a challenging problem to go solve. I don't know if people are ever going to get it right. I don't have an opinion on exactly what is right. I would give you a caveat though that the beginner and the advanced and expert or whatnot, they're very hard to quantify. I think we're almost always better off when we can point to a project or describe how we used a language or a skill, as opposed to listing it in a bullet point. You still need your bullet point list of proficiencies. That doesn't need to be on your resume. At the bottom, probably just a bullet point list of all the different things you can do technically, I guess. But I would maybe caution you on going overboard on the beginner expert labels, because they're hard to know what that actually means. And you might be better off to use that space to describe what that actually is, as opposed to trying to list it out. And also, unless you are truly an expert, truly, you're probably never going to be an expert until you graduate and spend a few years doing one specific thing. And maybe then you're an expert, but probably still not. So I would certainly caution the use of expert, and people will call you out on it if you put the word expert next to something. And they'll expect that you are truly an expert, like you have memorized the API docs for an entire language, for example. So you use sparingly, and make sure you can back it up with whatever you claim. Any other questions about, I think these are my 2 slides about resumes. Any other questions about resumes?
Okay, I'm asking a lot of questions, but I have another one. Okay, so this semester I'm taking additional to all my computer science and all that. I'm taking an entrepreneurship and a public speaking course. Should I include that in my resume?
Sometimes people list out projects there, and so I think it's a really good idea to maybe have a project section on your resume, and presumably your entrepreneurial stuff would have some kind of projects. And again, I might speak to it as opposed to listing out the course that you took. I might list out like a project you did in that class as a way to kind of showcase that experience. And if you do get like a minor or an emphasis, or you do like a program, an entrepreneurial stuff, I know that there's some of those. You can list that underneath your education, right? Sometimes people list like, hey, I had an entrepreneurial emphasis, or a minor in entrepreneurial studies, or something like that. So I might solve it that way. Yeah. The public speaking one, it might be a bit tougher. I probably wouldn't put the public speaking one on there. Candidly, they're going to probably know, because ideally you've learned lots of things, you can go apply it in your interview with them and how you present yourself to people. So might not be as good of it. But if you do public speaking, then you're actually doing like public speaking, like I suppose like what I'm doing now might count as public speaking, like on the side for other stuff. Then maybe you can kind of consider putting public speaking on the resume as a skill. But make sure like it's actually a skill and not just maybe a class at that point.
Yeah, because in high school I used to be in like the public speaking group, and I was the captain, so like I had some experience.
Yeah.
Before college.
Okay. Yeah. So possibly then. But I just make sure you can really speak to your experiences there, because you know what? I forgot one content tip here. Never put Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, or any other skill like that on the resume. Every single person knows how to use Microsoft Word and Excel. The one caveat is that if you know how to use Excel, like VLOOKUPs and pivot tables and sparklines and everything else and macros, then you can put like Excel, but you better be like ready if you're gonna put like Excel. And most people just put that on there. Also, what is not a skill? Hardworking is not a skill. Everybody is hardworking. Everyone is communicative. Everyone is, entrepreneurial to some extent. So I would, that certainly does not belong in the skill section. And I would probably argue that almost all of those types of things of hardworking, dedicated, whatever, pick your favorite adjective, do not belong in the resume at all. Because everybody is that. And I want you to prove that to me with what you've done, not put in a bullet point. So, yeah.
I had a quick question. Earlier you mentioned that you recommended to have education first on the resume.
Yep.
Would you say that in terms of like skills, a skills list and like projects or other club involvements, would you say which of those should be first, skills or involvements?
I would put the involvements. I think oftentimes you're going to find skills at the bottom. That's kind of like even like, maybe a 4-column table across the bottom might have different skill areas or something like that. So I think skills at the bottom is a pretty common thing. Across the rest of the resume, I'd probably go education, job experiences, projects, or maybe job experiences, extracurriculars, projects, and then your skills section that way.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. Alrighty. Let's go ahead and move on. All right. Cover letters. On job applications, especially online, they usually will allow you to still attach a cover letter. I have never written, well, I have written, I would not today recommend using a cover letter, especially as someone who's now hired a bunch of people and looked at hundreds of resumes. I'm not going to read your cover letter, period. What I will read is a cover paragraph, though. In the cover paragraph, so let's say we're like online, so like, hey, you can either attach or paste a cover letter. What I do is I click on the paste icon or like the paste button, and I'm going to write you a 3 or 4 sentence description about what excites me about whatever I'm applying for. And I'm going to make it very personal, like, hey, I saw this job allows you to do X, and I think that would be really fun. I've had X and Y experience that relate to doing that, and I would love to kind of continue growing in this area with you, something like that. So do not put more than a cover paragraph, though, on a cover letter. Even if you have to write a cover letter, make it a cover paragraph. because of the next point, where a human being is reading this, and they're reading lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of them. So you need to be concise, and you need to be relevant and human. What is very easy to do is to copy and paste the same cover letter text, change your company, and paste like a whole like 2-page long cover letter that has nothing to do with what the role that you're applying for is. I would not do that. I prefer nothing over that, and I prefer the cover paragraph over nothing. If you decide that you still want to write a cover letter and do it like fully, do not put "Dear Sir" or "Madam." It's way too formal. We are not in the accounting space. We're not in the other heavily regulated traditional industry. We are in the software industry where you wear t-shirts and shorts to work, and we're doing this stuff. "Dear Sir" or "Madam" has no place there. Unless you want to go work for like a super traditional old company that's very old school, you don't need it, and it's going to hurt you to have "Dear Sir" or "Madam." I just put "hello," or just no intro, just get right to the point. Similarly, you should never ever be putting an address on a cover letter. I think the address idea is antiquated. We're not in like the 1950s at that point, right? Of like, hey, I want to go mail you my cover letter, and you go mail me something back. Don't put like an actual address on a cover letter. It says letter. So, any questions about cover letters? Alrighty, cool. Interview strategies. So, some soft skills. 1, research the company. You should have an idea of what this company does, very specifically. Like, unfortunately, I was literally just interviewing someone yesterday for Scale, my current company. And they're like, "Oh, so what do you guys do?" I was like, "What do you mean, what do we do?" I didn't tell them that, but it's just like, you should know what we do. If you're applying for the job and I'm on the phone talking to you, you better sure as heck know what's happening here. I get it at the career fair. The one time when you're excused not to research the company is like a career fair kind of setting, where you need to go talk to loads and loads of companies, and you probably don't have time to go research 55 different companies fully, and that's fine. But if you are on the phone or you actually have an interview with someone, you better research them well and be prepared for what that is on the soft skills side. Additionally, you will be asked, do you have any additional questions? Every time. Like, you really can't finish an interview without, do you have any additional questions? I would highly encourage you to have an additional question. Just think of something about their industry. Hey, I saw this blog post that the company published recently about X. What are your thoughts on that? Tell me more about what I would expect to be able to do in this internship. What other kinds of opportunities do interns have? Do you guys do any training for X? Those are all different types of things that you can ask. It doesn't matter what your question is, but I would encourage you to have a question. If I say, do you have any additional questions? You say, nope, I'm good. It'll be weird. I'm expecting a question. So that's just some quick bullet points on the soft skills side. On the hard skills side, all right. And I forgot who asked before, but let's get your question done after this part. So you need to practice whiteboarding. Whether it's the COVID world of like, hey, we're going to type out things, we're going to do a Google Hangout, and you're going to type your answers somewhere, or it's actually physically on a whiteboard, maybe next year. You need to practice writing, like solving problems and writing code. It takes a lot of practice. And there are many tools that we can do, like HackerRank and this whole like leak code stuff. There is no shortage of interview prep and practice out there. There's even whole organizations dedicated to having students practice whiteboarding with each other. Honestly, be like a great club event for you guys to just put on, like as this club that we're in right now. Like, hey, we're gonna have a practice whiteboarding night. Those are cool things to do. We did that a couple years ago, and it worked out well. Anyways, practice, practice, practice. The other thing, when you're in the interview, take your time to process what's being asked. It is okay. So you tell the interviewer, great, give me 2 minutes to read through this. You don't need to blurt out with an answer in the first second or two. Let it soak in, think through the different implications. The other thing I guess I didn't write out as a bullet point here, pay attention to every single word in the prompt. It'll be like, there's a little prompt, right, that they show you like what the problem is. Make sure you read every single word. Oftentimes when I see people fail a tech interview, like just completely fail, it's because they didn't read. They just jumped right in, they didn't truly read every word, and they just missed key details or hints that were already in like that prompt part. So take your time, process it, read the prompt. The strategy I ended up using by the time I graduated was I would actually usually write things out in pseudocode. And I would tell the interviewer, hey, I'm gonna go jot down my notes in some pseudocode, and then I'm gonna go write it out in like compilable actual code. The writing out in pseudocode does two things. One, it allows you to kind of get your thoughts out on paper and really like, visualize the flow. It also gives the interviewer a chance to know where your head is at. If you spend the first 15 minutes just in your own head and writing out some kind of complicated code, the interviewer has no chance to engage with you. If I'm gonna sit with you for 45 minutes and watch you code, don't make it miserable for me. I wanna actually help you. My goal is to, most people who are interviewing's goal is that you do succeed. We wanna test you, but we also want you to succeed. And if you write out the pseudocode and say, hey, here's my thoughts. I think I'm gonna try this out. If they see anything that's like way off, they're probably gonna ask you like, oh, have you considered X? So that way you don't need to like erase all your like hard-written, compilable, like fully perfect syntax code. They can just go correct it in the pseudocode phase. What I do next from the pseudocode is I'll literally start taking the pseudocode and like on like the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, I'll start writing like the line-by-line equivalent of my pseudocode of like, but like with the syntax. The other part that I find helpful is to not get hung up on like the exact like methods. I would stub out like helper methods. If there's like something like, you know, like, hey, there's this whole like string formatting thing that needs to go happen first, as opposed to like trying to like sanitize all like the input strings. It's like, hey, there's a sanitized string method at the top. And then after you have your sanitized string method, then go ahead and do those things. So as opposed to like getting stuck just trying to implement one specific method that's not part of the main problem, just make up a method and say, hey, I'm gonna make a helper method. We'll fill it in later, but just get like past where you're stuck with these, like you can stub out the helper methods. And if you have time at the end, you can go back and fill those in. But if you don't have time at the end, you didn't miss the entire point of the project and you got most of it done. And you just need to go back in and fill in those like helper methods that you're like your cheat methods, I guess, right? Of like, do the thing, and then you can go figure out how to do the thing later. I think that's. Oh, any questions about just interviewing, or did you want to ask your question now about interviewing the person I asked before?
What are you looking for when you do like a tech segment? Do you like a technical interview? Do you want the person to interact with you and speak to you, or I don't know? I
do, yes. Specifically in that regard, yes. I want to understand what's in your head. If you are silent for the first 30 minutes and just writing things out and making frustrated grunts when things are confusing, I have no idea what's going on inside of your head. And I won't be able to like help you. I won't be able to know how your brain works. I won't be able to see any of it. I just have to see what you're writing out. And so I would encourage you to communicate early and often. You shouldn't obviously be asking like for help and answers, but really communicating what is going on inside your head is critical. You need to be able to explain what it is. It's almost more important to see how your brain works and how you process information than it is to figure out like, did you get the right answer in the end? I care about both very much. So do communicate as much as possible, every part of the process.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I hear that phrase a lot, that they're looking to see how your brain works. What
Yes.
is the quote unquote correct way to think about a problem and work through it?
Yeah, good question. Let's see here. So I think probably at a higher level than like the specific like runtime considerations and whatnot, it's more like just understanding the problem and how you kind of approach it. So I think that's where that first part comes into consideration of like really taking the time to read it, and understand what's being asked first. And so I'd almost probably like confirm my understanding with like, I'm going to read this. Okay, I understand. I'm going to just repeat the question back in my own words. Like, hey, I understand that we're going to go through this array. Our goal is to go find out X and Y, and solve that. Once you kind of get past that part, though, I would say there's kind of a comfort level of like, how comfortable are you like with these concepts? Like, hey, are you pretty comfortable actually using like a hash map? Like, oh, I could use a hash map. Let me talk through the consideration of using a hash map as opposed to just using like a for loop to go through everything. And it's kind of seeing like the trade-offs that you make. Maybe that's a good way to put it, like the trade-offs that you make, right? Like, coding is all about trade-offs in every part of what we do. And so maybe just kind of walking through like how your brain is thinking about the different trade-offs between speed and practicality. I'd say for myself, I care about practicality a lot personally. So I'd be looking for like less perfect runtime, especially if it's like, hey, there's a small sample size. It's like I don't need like perfect runtime speed. I need to be readable, and I need it to be like, hey, I want to go work with this person. I guess that's the other thing to consider, especially as you join thinking about startups specifically. Whoever is interviewing with you is going to be literally like your peer. They have to work with you every single day and help you like go write code. And so like you want almost like a mini friendship with this person of like collaborative problem solving, because it's literally going to be what you're going to be doing with this person as soon as they hire you. Is like working at like Microsoft. Of course, it's a different team just doing the interviews and whatnot. But still, the bigger picture there is you want to be able to work with this person and like say, yep, I can code with this person for a month or 5 or 20, and do it that way. So. I'm not sure how close that was to answering your exact question, but hopefully helpful.
Yeah, it was. Thanks.
Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and move on, but we can definitely save some time at the end, right? All right. Let's talk about the career fair just a little bit longer, though, or like things like the career fair. At Iowa State, it's the same people at roughly the same companies every single year. So from freshman year to sophomore year to junior year, even at the big companies like Microsoft or Boeing or Caterpillar or John Deere, pick your favorite big company. It's the same people every single year. So get to know them. I met lots of people as a freshman that I still I frankly almost became like friends with them by the time I graduated because I've seen them so much at every single career fair. So get to know them early and often. You should be adding every single person you come across on LinkedIn. You need to be using LinkedIn. Like need to. It's not really optional. You need to be adding people on LinkedIn left and right to build your network. It's how you get jobs. It's how you find jobs. It's how you get referrals. It's how you just see cool opportunities in general. My LinkedIn today is how I just know about everything that's happening in my industry. It's frankly how I found Jonathan in this event. I think I saw someone just liked Jonathan's status of like, hey, Google Developer Student Club, and I was like, cool. I should reach out to Jonathan and figure out hey, could this talk happen and stuff like that. LinkedIn is how the magic happens. You need to be on it. Now, the cool part about LinkedIn is when you interview with someone, add that person on LinkedIn if you can. When you meet someone at the career fair, add them on LinkedIn. shit, add me on LinkedIn, right? Like these are the people that you need, like anybody that you're coming across from like on-campus events, career fair, interviews, what have you, add that person on LinkedIn. Because the cool thing about LinkedIn is, as people move around, you get connections at really cool companies. I think I'm literally like connected like almost every single like San Francisco like startup that's like reasonably big. I'm pretty sure I actually have something like, loads of people at Facebook and Google and Twitter and LinkedIn itself and Snapchat and Zoom. I mean, I literally have people at like every single one of these companies now, not because actually like I met them when they worked at the company, but because they were working, say like they were an intern with me at Boeing, and then they went on to go do this other thing, and now they're doing like, they're at Tesla, right? Because they went from Boeing to Tesla later on after 2 years. As people move around, you're going to see people at cool companies. When you want to go work at a cool company, you're going to have someone there that you know, or at least be like close to someone there that you know. So that's my spiel about LinkedIn, but I would definitely encourage everybody to be on LinkedIn. Alrighty. Internship strategies. All right. We like math. We're computer people, I suppose, right? It can be a numbers game. So here's a fun exercise. Let's say you want 3 job offers, which is probably most of us, right? That'd be great to have 3 different job offers or internship offers. That's a great position to be in for anybody. So the next thing you need to do after that part is you need to figure out what is your interview to job offer ratio. That is, how many interviews does it take to get 1 job offer? Anybody have a number they have in mind for that ratio?
The 1 to 2, maybe 1 to 3, or 3 to 1. Otherwise,
Yeah. Yeah. So I think 3 to 1. I think can work. I'd say that's even on the lower side probably. I'd say probably like 3 to 5 is probably pretty average. Let's go maybe like 4. Then how many like job applications do you usually need to go put out there to get like 1 interview? Anybody different have a number for that one? It's okay, you can speak up. All right, let's go with 10. All right, job applications are kind of weird, right? Sometimes you don't know really what's happening on the other side. Let's go like 10 job applications, 2 interviews. All right, so we want 3 job offers. We want, let's go through. So we have like the interview to job offer ratio, we got 3. And let's say maybe 5 to 10 on the application side per interview. We can call that, let's see here. So we got 3, and let's go through 3 and 6 just to make things easy, I guess, right? So if it's 3 job offers that we want, every 3 interviews we get a job offer, and every 3 applications we get an interview. About how many companies should we be talking to? Or sorry, this is 3, 3, and 6, right? 3, 3, and 6. So if it's, yeah. Anybody have a guess? I'll literally go pick on someone. All right. Trevor. How many companies should we be talking to if we want 3, 3, and 6?
You need to talk to over 50 companies.
Yeah, so it's probably about right? So basic math, we probably want 3 times 3 times 6. So 36, or actually 9 times 6, right? So 54 companies. Yeah, that's perfect. That's literally how many companies I was talking to get my 3 different internship offers. On the career fair stuff, I would go hard. Like that's my one day to go hard. There's also some other days, but I would literally go there from I think usually 12 to 6, and I would be there like 12:30, and I would leave when they kicked me out at like 6. So I was there for like a solid 5.5 hours, and I would literally print off 54 resumes or more. And I would try to like hand out pretty much all the resumes, talk to as many companies as I could, especially like my first couple years of like being at Iowa State. I mean, both fall and spring. Even though I had something in the summer, I still talk to people, right? Because it's the same people every single career fair. So I want to go build a relationship with them, tell them what I'm up to, and say like, hey, what are you guys doing next year, et cetera, et cetera. So 54 companies, that's a lot. I'm pretty sure most people did not actually talk to 54 companies. But also, most people probably didn't have 3 different internship offers for the next summer. And you can use whatever, pick your favorite numbers here, right? Just be realistic with yourself. Maybe it is 2 interviews to every job offer, cool. Maybe it's every 4 applications you get an interview. Maybe it's every 20 though. Maybe every 20 applications you get 1 interview. Because you don't have that much experience yet. You're a freshman, it's getting hard. Do the math, right? I mean, it's just math. If I learned anything about coding, the code does not lie, the math does not lie. So pick your favorite numbers, but think about it that way. At the same time, it is also not a numbers game. I would reach out to companies pretty directly, especially startups, right? Usually there's only like 1 engineering manager or 2 at a startup. Just go send them a message on LinkedIn or guess their email like, hey, it's probably going to be Shaun@scale.com. Sure enough, my email is Shaun@scale.com. It's not too hard to to guess, right? Especially at startups, right? It's always just like first name at company website. Email them your resume and make it a little bit personal, but just look people up and email them. Find a way to stand out. One thing I did for Twilio, I've actually like made a Twilio like text bot thing. You could text this Twilio phone number, any math problem, it would go hit the Wolfram Alpha API, and it would text you back the answer. So you can like solve calculus equations over text message with what I built on Twilio. And I put that on my resume in the bottom right corner when I applied at Twilio. And then sure enough, I got this amazing internship there. So think about ways you can kind of stand out or use or demonstrate experience with the company's software or service. For example, Scale, we have an open API. You can sign up for it with a credit card. You go to town, you can do this like data labeling for your ML models. That's what we do at Scale. So use their service, find out how to stand out is what we're going there. My last slide here, and then we can answer some questions. I love entrepreneurship a lot. I was very entrepreneurial at Iowa State, and just in general, I love entrepreneurial things. For me, the student startups definitely helped in a really big way land all my other internships. I had loads of talking points, my little like student-run startup, and whatnot. Now, when I graduated, I actually had a choice. I already had some startups and a lot of different things kind of in the works, like the different like student startups. And I was like, hey, actually, I could probably have a decent shot of running a startup right out of school. I just keep doing what I was doing already, like my last couple of years of college, and I'd have income coming in, and I don't need to go work at a job. I just go straight to entrepreneurship. And I really thought about it. What I kind of landed on though was I didn't know how to build a real startup. I had my student-run startup, and it was going, and it was kind of fun and cool, but I had no idea how to go sell a $100,000 deal. I didn't know how marketing automation worked. I did not know how product development worked. I didn't actually know what like great startups look like. Like how is a great startup actually run? And so what I'm doing now is I'm getting paid 6 figures to go learn how a real startup works. I'm doing my job. I'm doing engineering stuff and all those things, but I don't need to go do it. I only need to learn every lesson myself the hard way and have it come out of my own pocket. I'm getting paid to watch how a startup works. And now I joined one of the fastest growing startups in Silicon Valley to really see what makes that tick. How does it actually go down? And it is amazing to see. I feel like I'm learning a ton. I'm getting paid extremely well to learn a lot. And in my head, personally, for me at least, I still have one day I want to go have my own startup too. I think that would be great. I want to make my own software as a service company. But if I get paid very nicely for a number of years to go learn how startups work, I think I'm coming out ahead. And so I would say this is something to consider. Everybody has their own journey. If you're really like, you have a startup right now and it's making you just a shit ton of money left and right and whatnot, by all means, go for it. But for most of us who love entrepreneurship, have some kind of side hustles going on, I would still encourage you to think about getting a quote unquote normal job at a Silicon Valley startup to go learn how that actually works. Marketing, sales, product, engineering, legal, HR, all the different things, right? There's a lot to learn. So with that, I think that's about it. For startups, there's Angel List, a breakout list. LinkedIn Top Startups is like a list of people. And then back to LinkedIn, do follow cool people early and often. They're going to put you onto all the different events. They're going to put you onto the latest technology, the latest startups. So with that, I think that is what I had in mind for us. We're actually, I guess we used up all of our time. We had questions throughout, but happy to stay on for a bit and answer any other questions you guys have. So.
I had one quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
Earlier you mentioned all your clubs and activities that you did while you were a student. How did you manage all of your time between clubs, internships, classes, while trying to maintain a good mental health?
Yeah, good question. So in some ways, it's probably not for the faint of heart, right? I'd be lying if I said it wasn't stressful at times or like it wasn't a bit crazy there. I didn't talk about it yet. One thing that I think is helpful for especially us in like computer science, software, computer engineering type of roles is the GPA piece with the classes. I was telling Jonathan a little bit about this. My mentality was, if you have it above a 3, you're set. And you can pretty much fill all the extra time and energy that you'd spend trying to get a really high GPA on clubs, activities, and entrepreneurship stuff. Especially if you have like a 3.5 is absolutely golden, right? If you're at a 3.5, I think there's absolutely no lift that you get between a 3.5 and a 3.9. You get the same interviews, same internships. No one really cares when it's above 3.5. But the amount of hours that you have to spend on classes to go between a 3.5 and a 3.9 is an exponential increase. There's a lot of hours that takes to get a 3.9, a lot. There's no getting around it. And I purposely made the decision to actually not get a 4.0. And I said, hey, I want to go spend all my time I would be doing, and I want to go spend it on clubs and entrepreneurship stuff and other things. As long as I had above a 3, I was set. But if I got like below a 3, that's not okay. You do need above a 3 as well. So you always aim for above a 3, but once you get past there, especially if you get to like 3.5 range, you have more than enough time to go refocus your energy on some of the other things that you could be learning or doing that way. So that might help a little bit on like the mental bandwidth and like how do you keep up with all these different things. I'd also say it taught me a lot about just time management in general. Because startups are freaking crazy. I mean, they just are. It's part of the fun. Everything is on fire. Everything is happening all the time. That's just the startup world. And so when you kind of are already used to that a little bit by self-inflicting some crazy schedules on your side, it's like, hey, this actually is just how the startup world works. You get good at like time management, prioritization, Google Calendar stuff. Those all things kind of come together too that way. So, does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Shaun, I have a quick question about how you would compare working at some companies, let's say like in the Midwest versus in the Silicon Valley, and what the main differences are. That I really noticed.
Yeah, great question. So, I would say that, especially compared to like San Francisco or even maybe Seattle to an extent, there are, think about like where all the meetups, the developer conferences, and all like the companies that are hiring that are pretty cool and like role models for the rest of the startup world. For better and for worse, it is going down in San Francisco. So I like all these user conferences are literally like blocks away. Like, hey, I literally can just walk to it from the office to like this awesome user conference. If I want to go meet the guy that started this whole like API service or something, I can go grab coffee with him like down the street. And so as far as like being like in the tech startup world, COVID might change some of that, candidly, right? Like, hey, with the COVID world, maybe things are going to be a little bit different. But the mentality and the closeness, it's a small world in Silicon Valley. It really is. And so being close to that, I have found to be helpful. I think the other thing is just, we were joking about the beginning of like WebEx versus Zoom kind of thing, right? I think you're going to find a lot of like, the latest technologies, like, hey, people are going to be using React and Next.js and all these other like cool technologies on like software stuff, probably more prevalently in Silicon Valley as opposed to like some of the companies around Iowa. There are cool companies around Iowa. For instance, I would certainly put like Workiva there in that bucket of like, hey, if I were to stay in Iowa, I think they're more Silicon Valley-esque than most companies I've been a part of. And I had actually really good experiences like with Union Pacific, right? Union Pacific or like Caterpillar, John Deere. They are cool experiences. I'd say it's probably less like of the pure computer science, web apps, APIs kind of side of things, right? There's certainly a difference there just in terms of how business is done that way. So did that kind of help, Karthik, or were you hoping for a different angle there?
No, that makes sense. I was just kind of thinking about how like the day-to-day work might be like, but I think as you said, it's probably a lot to do with the technologies also, and
yeah, and there certainly is like the Silicon Valley hustle, right? As there's lots of people like working really hard, really bright people. I'd say scale is certainly not like the 9 to 5. People go pretty darn hard, which makes it fun. That's kind of like, I'm young, I don't have kids yet. I want to be like somewhere where people are just working like really hard and just full of talent. And I think sometimes in the Midwest it can be like, hey, it is more 9 to 5. I show up for my job, we get it done. I go home, I enjoy time with my kids. It's a great place to raise a family, that kind of stuff. So it's maybe a different attitude sometimes in that regard as well. So
thank you.
Yeah. So and I think there's not a right or wrong answer there. Just kind of work-life balance and what you value the most at any given point. So.
Sorry. You can go, Kyle.
Okay, thank you. When you talk about like startup internships, do a lot of those provide housing? Because I know like San Francisco is like super high cost of housing, and like sort of how does that whole thing come into play when you hire them?
So I'd say the bigger ones do. So even when I interned like at Twilio, they did provide a very, very generous like housing stipend that would cover it. I think it was on the order of like $2,500 or $3,000 a month for housing that Twilio provided for the interns. So if you're going to join a super small startup, say like less than 75 people, they might not, which might be more difficult. But as soon as you get to like these larger startups, maybe 200 people or more, they're still kind of startups. I think Twilio was probably about like 400 people when I joined and they were just going public. So that's kind of the stage that Twilio was at when I was there. Any startup like that should actually have probably, they would provide housing. I think Microsoft and Amazon and Boeing, Union Pacific, they all provided housing as well. So I think you should expect that from a lot of these bigger tech startups or tech internships. Yeah. And I guess as a random story about Boeing. Boeing is actually great. I mean, they have amazing benefits. It was like strict 9 to 5, but they paid every intern like I think it was like $7,000 in relocation just to move out to Seattle for your summer. We had like full insurance benefits. We had holiday and overtime pay as an intern, and they had like still like a monthly like housing stipend too. It's like Boeing's comp package overall. Like when you compare it, like just take that $7,000 relocation, divide it across the 3 months you're there, like actually $2,000 a month just from that. I don't know if they're still doing that and everything now, but some of these like non-traditional software companies do have amazing benefits that are probably understated as well. So I would definitely encourage you to not rule them out. So it's just kind of a different type of work, but still really cool. So yeah.
Is a housing stipend or anything along those lines in terms of benefits, is that something you would bring up during an interview or after they've offered you a position?
You know, I would probably, I don't think you're going to be like penalized for asking about it during the interview. Frankly, I just usually see it in the offer and just kind of consider that part there. And it is more of a startup. I'm probably like ask for it or negotiate it a little bit. I think you usually kind of struggle to negotiate at any bigger company, but if you're doing a truly startup thing, I would say most things are on the table to be negotiated somewhat. So that's something to keep in mind as well. There. But I guess as far as the interview part, yeah, I probably wouldn't. Maybe a more tactful way to ask about it is like, what are some of the other benefits interns have? Like, oh, well, we also offer interns housing, and we have these events throughout the internship and all those other things, and that can be helpful. And maybe just what are the benefits interns have there? That would be a good way to put that.
Well, yeah, if that is all the questions, thanks, Shaun, so much for giving us a talk. I feel like everyone got a lot out of this. This was really cool stuff.
Absolutely.
I'm going to stop the recording here.